as my friend, the late historian Tony Judd used to say, quoting John Maynard Keynes, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? And the facts have changed in the last 3 years since I published that book, both in the United States and in Germany. But let me first say what the original thesis is. The original thesis is that Germany, like no other country in the world, made its historic crimes a center of its historical narrative. Now, I still stand by that, okay? Countries like and people like heroic narratives. Everybody wants to put their country in the most heroic light as possible, and of course, their ancestors. And when that becomes impossible because of great tragedies or losing wars, they see themselves as victims. You know, my ancestors would have been heroic, but history made them victims. And, you know, some countries seesaw back and forth between a heroic and a victim narrative, but no country in the world ever said, you know what, we were perpetrators. We were fundamentally evil. And that's something that we have to acknowledge and reckon with. Now, the Germans were very slow in acknowledging it. They didn't want to. They still resist it in many ways. But at a certain point around the turn of the century, for a variety of reasons that I try to go into in the book, it really became a sort of the deepest conviction of German self-understanding. All of a sudden, we get a whole different kettle of fish, which goes back to the Historikerstreit. It gets called the Historikerstreit 2.0.
Right.
And says, no, we have to insist on the singularity of the Holocaust. And this, I mean, we can talk for a minute about where that comes. I think it's a complicated story where it comes from, but let me just say that I think it's deeply wrong. I understand it from a German perspective, although it's utterly ahistorical because it forgets the context of this. Set up the Holocaust, first of all, as the gold standard for evil, against which anything else is just not all that bad. Right? And that's not good. Secondly, it elevates Jewish suffering as being worse than any other kind of suffering. So I understand why Germans want to insist on the singularity. I simply think it's a huge mistake, and so there was recently a case, for example, which came up in November. Two Jewish students went to see a play in Munich by a Lebanese playwright called Vaji Muad, and they decided it was anti-Semitic, and they wrote a letter insisting that it be taken off stage and that the city of Munich withdraw its funds from the theater. Okay? Now, when I first read about this, first of all, I was appalled because this is, one sees a lot of cancellation. The second thing that happened to me was that I saw in the first newspaper notice, it was written by Moad in close cooperation with the great historian Natalie Zeman Davis, who happens to be Jewish.